Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Syhakhom. I'm a solutions architect at Logicworks. I am certified on AWS and Azure. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to operate a HIPAA compliant cloud. And the key word here is operations. And I think as an SA and probably as IT managers out there listening, we spend a lot of time talking about how to architect HIPAA or high trust compliant solutions. And I think sometimes we forget that when we migrate workloads from on-prem to the cloud or build net new workloads in the cloud, actually it's the day two, the ongoing operations of that cloud workload that's going to determine whether you're following those regulations or not. So that's what I'd like to focus on today. Just change my. So I'd like to begin with this statistic, which I think is really important. That's 76% of IT staff believe that leadership underestimates the time and cost of cloud management. And I think this is really important and not just one of those fake statistics, because I really actually run into this every day when I'm talking to customers. What happens is, as I said, even as a solutions architect, I spend a lot of time building a solution that checks all the boxes for HIPAA or high trust compliance. And what that tends to mean is sometimes we don't think about the ongoing challenges of cloud management because maybe we falsely assume that the cloud platform takes care of a lot of that stuff for us. The common misconception that if AWS or Azure is HIPAA compliant, then if I operate on those cloud platforms, I'm automatically HIPAA compliant, which I'll get into in a minute. And underestimating the level of effort that's required to maintain compliance can lead to big challenges, like your team being overwhelmed by things like patching and monitoring when they should really be focused on value generating things like infrastructure as code or building new platforms, or the stuff Bob just talked about, actually detecting threats in your environment, the stuff that really matters to your business. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about, let's level set about what you're actually responsible for managing in a public cloud environment so you can understand, okay, this is the first step to me really planning out how to build an effective cloud operations practice. Then I'm going to talk about planning for cloud management, the team you need to manage your cloud, and finally I end with a case study of a company that we worked with that began with a lot of IT management chaos, and we kind of helped them get back on track. So first, why am I Logicworks qualified to talk on this topic? So Logicworks is a top global cloud migration and management partner. We're the top tier of AWS partner with an MSP competency. We're the top tier of Azure partner with the Azure Expert MSP. We also are a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for cloud MSPs. So we have a lot of third-party validation about the work that we do. And we actually focus on highly regulated industries like healthcare and finance. So that's why I'm talking to you guys today. These are some of our customers on the slide. And not only do we help our customers achieve these compliances, but we go through these audits ourselves. So Logicworks is High Trust CSF certified. We're annually audited for HIPAA. We're a PCI DSS level 1 service provider. So, we drink our own Kool-Aid. So let's start with laying the foundation for what are we actually responsible for managing in a cloud environment. So you've probably seen, if you've attended other Angel Beats or really any webinar that a major cloud provider has put together, you've probably seen some version of this chart on the right. It's a shared responsibility matrix, essentially. Before you get too caught up in the details of what's your responsibility and what's not your responsibility, this is the thing I like to say to customers to help clarify. If you can configure it in the console or in the portal, you are responsible for it. So just remember that if you can configure it, you're responsible for it. So in a service like a Azure VM or an AWS EC2 instance, if you can configure the operating system, if you can choose which operating system to launch, and you're responsible for patching it, right? Whereas if you use one of the services to the right-hand side of this slide, like a RDS or a managed database service, where you don't actually have access to configure the operating system, then you don't have to manage it, right? So that's why I'm having conversations on a day-to-day basis with CISOs and CTOs who are saying, to reduce my HIPAA and high trust audit scope, I want to use some of these managed services so that I don't have to do things like patch my VMs so that it's not in scope for my audit, right? So that's a huge decision that we make during the upfront architecture piece that impacts our ongoing operational burden. So if you guys, listening are already operating on the cloud, or you're planning a migration to the cloud, I'd say the first step is go through your console, take an hour with your team and say, what services are we actually running? And does everyone on the team understand what our responsibility is for managing this resource? Does everybody understand the line of demarcation between something like an RDS and something like EC2? Chances are that your IT manager will understand this, your DevOps engineer will understand this intuitively, but maybe some of your lower level engineers won't. And that's the threat to your business, right? And the next step is to actually put together, or even ask them if you're already operating in the cloud, how much time are you spending on some of these ongoing operational tasks daily? Why is it that we're not able to focus on sort of ongoing operations or optimizations, and we're focused on these things like monitoring and OS patching? And really level setting as an organization about how much time this stuff is taking you guys, I think is a really useful exercise. So Logicworks actually went to all our customers, hundreds of healthcare and finance companies, and we asked, how much time are you guys spending on this stuff? And this is actually real data that we've pulled and averaged from all those customers. So if you're looking for kind of a benchmark of how much time this stuff takes, you can screenshot this slide. So when we look at developing a cloud management practice, I like to talk about these 4 pillars. The first is 24/7 operational support. So that's things like monitoring, OS patching, incident response, identity and access management. Then there's service delivery management. And this is something that we see a lot of companies sort of forget to plan for, which is a technical project manager, somebody who is tracking KPIs, things like uptime, SLAs, and stuff like that. And also, as your environment grows, you'll find in a cloud environment that your developers or other teams will be asking for new infrastructure on a very frequent basis, much more frequently than they were on-prem. And quickly, those ticket requests or those one-off requests will be very overwhelming for the support team or the team of engineers that's working to support that. And you'll need somebody to actually coordinate and schedule those tickets or those patches with the development team, with the end customer service team. That's a critical function in a lot of cloud management teams, the kind of glue that binds cloud management teams together. Next, cost management. So cost management in the cloud is just fundamentally different than it is on premise, and that could be a whole presentation in of itself. But just understanding that that's a separate function that needs to be taken care of on a cloud management team versus in an on-premise environment where you're just basically dealing with annual hardware refresh cycles is really important. And lastly, CI/CD and IAC management. So this is the fun stuff that you wish your team could be working on all the time, or you wish you could be working on all the time. Things like, updating Terraform, writing scripts, managing your golden image pipeline, and also serving as an escalation point for that 24/7 support team. So in a mature cloud operations team, these different functions are potentially separate individuals, but all integrated into the same team and communicating regularly, right? So you've got your support team, your service delivery manager, your FinOps team, your DevOps team. What we often see in immature cloud teams or teams that are relatively new to cloud management is that this 24/7 operational support is actually, it's a team of maybe 3 to 5 engineers who are really operating on business hours and maybe have pager or Slack to get alarms for things that happen after hours. That service delivery management cost management function is actually taken care of by like an IT manager or even a CTO sometimes. So this CTO who's supposed to be thinking, strategically about the vision of the technology at the company is stuck doing things like making sure things are operating well on a day-to-day basis or doing things like cost management. And finally, that the fun stuff, the CI/CD and IAC management, is either not hired as a separate function or it's done ad hoc by some engineers. A lot of companies I talk to have built some CloudFormation or they've done some ARM templates, but they're not quite reached the maturity they want to reach, right? Because they're spending a lot of time on the other stuff that's on the screen. So here comes the little sales pitch, which is that Logicworks, how Logicworks fits into this is Logicworks takes care of all the stuff on the left-hand side of the screen. So we have a 24/7 operational support team. Every client gets a designated service delivery manager. We do ongoing cost management. We purchase RIs, all that kind of stuff. And then on the right-hand side, that CI/CD and IAC management is a shared responsibility between Logicworks and our customers. And this is really where the fun sort of collaboration can happen, because we're, as Logicworks, we're building infrastructure as code modules. Our client's DevOps team is integrating that into their CI/CD pipeline. So that's really allowing them to get to maturity on a cloud operations automation perspective much, much faster than they could get on their own, because they have sort of Logicworks guiding them on the way. It's also allowing them to focus on those things because they don't have to focus on the stuff on the left-hand side of the screen, right? So really briefly, I'm going to go through a case study of a healthcare platform that we helped to kind of ease their cloud operations burden. So this was an enterprise master patient index platform. They had millions of health records. They had to meet HITRUST compliance, and they had a small internal IT staff. So they had 3 to 5 IT people. None of them were that experienced in AWS, and they approached Logicworks and said, we have to launch a cloud-based SaaS platform. They were running like desktop software essentially. We have to run it in 6 months. So can you help us get there with all these requirements and get to operational maturity without having to build that in-house? So they came to us saying, these are all the HITRUST CSF domains. These are generally the HITRUST CSF domains, right? They went through their own risk assessment to pull out which controls apply to them in HITRUST. And they said, which of these controls can Logicworks help us with, right? And from an ongoing management perspective, a lot of these things can be in Logicworks' purview. And we can basically reduce, we did reduce the EMPI platform's ongoing HITRUST scope and management scope by taking on some of this stuff ourselves as a HITRUST CSF certified provider. So we provided our Logicworks managed services. We have 3 packages. All the things I already articulated, like monitoring, backups, 24/7 support, patching, cost management, are all included in these things. In addition, the Cloud Operations Complete also includes every third-party security service that you will need to check off the box for HITRUST or HIPAA compliance. We're very consultative with the services, the third-party services we've used before, and can guide you on what is actually required out of the hundreds of services that are available, both cloud native and third-party, to say what you really need is this. This has been gone through an audit before, it's been verified in an audit before, and will allow you to pass your audit. So that's why the prescriptive guidance from us can accelerate compliance for a lot of our customers. So at the end of the day, the company, the EMPI platform, had to meet about 375 HITRUST controls. And when we went through them item by item, nearly half of those controls were taken care of by AWS and by Logicworks. So AWS takes care of the physical security controls. Logicworks takes care of over 100 infrastructure level security configurations. So that's things like firewall rules, encryption, patching of instances, things like an incident response plan, which we mutually worked on with this company to sort of have as documentation for their HITRUST audit, right? And the company takes care of application personnel controls. So that's the division of responsibility there. But you can see automatically we're taking care of almost 40% of their controls are taken care of out of the box. So that's drastically reduced their compliance scope. So the results of the project, the company actually ended up saving about 40% on their projected costs because they would have had to hire and train a team of AWS engineers who had high trust experience, which by the way is not that common, to do that themselves, right? So they saved about 40% on their projected costs. They also reduced their compliance scope. I talked about that a number of times, and basically reduced their time to compliance. A 6-month timeline that might seem ridiculous to try to achieve high trust compliance and migrate their entire workloads was achieved. So they achieved their high trust certification in March of 2021 of this year without a hitch. And then lastly, I think the most important thing actually is they improved team efficiency. So what I keep talking about in this is they had to create a cloud management plan and they had to execute that plan in 6 months, right? Having their engineering team focus on those differentiating tasks, on building their new platform, on getting a new SaaS application out the door, rather than on the sort of nuts and bolts of cloud management was a huge, obviously, efficiency savings for them. But the last thing I'll say, just to summarize, I think that if you take anything away from this presentation, I would say sit down with your teams and really consider what your cloud management plan actually is. Don't assume necessarily that you've checked all of those boxes and that everyone on your team understands it. I think we could all improve what we're doing, right? So I hope you take the time to sit with your team and really understand what you're doing from a process and procedure standpoint. And if you have any questions about how to maintain a HIPAA or high trust compliance in a cloud platform, reach out to Logicworks.